All right, hi everyone. It's Danny. This is your lecture 9 in human evolution, or Intro to Physical Anthropology, or Intro to Biological Anthropology. This is the lecture on your mammalian heritage, right? This is where we start talking about the process of evolution rather than just the theory. We've covered the theory up to now. We've covered natural history and its its contribution of natural selection theory, rather. We covered genetics, classical genetics, as well as population genetics and genomics. And we've covered a few of the, I guess you could say, intellectual and political movements that came out of some phases of evolutionary theory, like sociobiology and social Darwinism. Well, today we start with the process, and specifically the process of how humans evolved. So let's start with that. Okay, you will remember this. This is the Linnaean taxonomy, uh, right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and then I always just include the English name because English is the common language of most of the students here. And here you see the classification of humans. We are animals in the kingdom Animalia. We are vertebrates in the phylum Chordata. We are mammals in the class Mammalia, primates in the order Primates. We are hominoids, or apes, in the family Hominidae, and we are humans in the genus Homo, and our species is Homo sapiens. So remember, though, that this Linnaean system is based on anatomical similarities. That was revolutionary for its time because it was in contrast to the Scala Naturae, which classified all living things according to an order of apparent complexity. It also created a singular classification system, a singular line by which everything could be classified, with God and the divine at the top, and inanimate objects like rocks or stones, minerals at the bottom. And the reason it was limited, though, is because anatomical similarities can only get you so far in understanding the actual relationships between different kinds of organisms. And I have to, as an example of that, again, these images of these quote unquote moles, right? This was a golden mole, this is a North American mole, and this is a marsupial mole. This guy is an insectivore closely related to shrews. This guy is in his own group, perhaps most closely related to elephants and aardvarks. And this guy is a marsupial, closely related to marsupials known as dasyurs, which means that he's also in a group with kangaroos, Tasmanian devils, and koalas. However, since the modern synthesis, since the advent of synthetic theory in evolution and genomics, taxonomy has been based on phylogeny more than anatomical similarities. Phylogeny, remember, is the analysis of evolutionary relationships. So with the modern synthesis and with genomics, scientists have had more powerful techniques for determining the evolutionary relationships between creatures, rather than just looking at their anatomy. Just to review, since I'm going to start off by talking about, well, what is a human, at least taxonomically, what is a human. So to review, we should go all the way back and just double check to make sure that we know what an organism, what a living thing is. So perhaps life on Earth originated 3.5 billion years ago, and it would have been starting off as self-replicating, self-organizing molecules. All living things, well, I say they consume matter and use energy, they grow or develop, they metabolize to maintain homeostasis, they reproduce, and they die. And then there's also this other characteristic that's always been compelling to me, yet I disagree with, uh, this notion that all living things have a membrane. That is, they have something that separates them from the outside world. I don't agree with that because it seems pretty obvious to me that there is no easy line to draw between an organism and its environment. And if you think about organisms like flowers, um, their bodies, in some very meaningful ways, extend beyond their bodies. Remember, birds and bees, pollinators for flowers, are their genitals. Uh, and so that's one example of how the body of a living thing, or if you like, its phenotype, extends beyond the apparent membrane around the organism itself. Oh, slide's a little broken, so let's just put it all up. Okay, so to start with on human classification, and note we're going to have a little red box here at the bottom that will be showing you what we're working on. To start off with, we humans are animals, members of the kingdom Animalia. Animals are organisms, and they are characterized by being eukaryotes, which means the nuclei of their cells has a wall around it that separates the nucleus, which holds the DNA, from the rest of the cell. Animals are all multicellular. You may have heard of single-celled animals or something like that. They are not actually in Kingdom Animalia. If it's got one cell, it's not an animal. All animals are predators, or you could call them heterotrophs. That means that all animals feed on other living things. Um, so even a cow, which eats grass, is a predator. It's a grass predator, right? Animals eat other living things. Finally, animals move bodily around their environment. They have the ability of motility. That is a power they have. They can pick themselves up and go someplace else, at least in some part of their life. Obviously, there are lots of animals that during certain phases of their lives are sedentary or sessile, um, but even these guys, at some point in their life, have the ability to move around. So we are also chordates. We are members of the phylum Chordata. Chordates are characterized by having notochords. That's really the one characteristic. All these creatures in these images here are chordates. A notochord is a spinal cord, a nerve that runs from the brain area down the creature's back. It's not the same thing as your vertebral column. Your vertebral column are the bones that protect your notochord. Your notochord is a nerve. All chordates have that. So snakes are reptiles. This is a fish, an amphibian, a mammal, a bird, another mammal. These are all chordates. This guy here is a tunicate, also known as a sea squirt. In their larval stage, they look a lot like tadpoles. They're an older group than even fish. They are chordates. They are related to the ancestors of the first fish. This guy is an adult after they come out of their larval stage. Well, when they're in their larval stage, what they do is they find a good spot to live and they plant their head in the ground there. And then they sort of digest their own brain and turn into just this pump for water and food, right? It's basically just a tube, in and out, in and out. Although all these guys are also, on one level, basically just tubes. Tubes with lots of ornaments hanging off the sides. So we are mammals, members of the class Mammalia. So let's go down the characteristics of mammals. This slide is a little broken, it looks like. So let's just start with this last characteristic. All mammals have something called heterodont dentition. That means they have different kinds of teeth in their head. We will go over all of these traits in more depth today, so you'll see what I mean. But just write that down for now. Mammals have heterodont dentition. Mammals, they all give live birth. Except for two kinds, really three species. There are two species of echidna and one species of platypus. They are the last members of an order of mammals known as Monotremata. They lay eggs. All other mammals give live birth. All mammals have hair. We'll talk about that too. All mammals are endothermic, which means they can regulate their own body temperature. They don't need to bask in the sun in order to warm up. They can produce their own heat. Most mammals are social, and in fact, mammals become social specialists. Not all mammals are social. Some mammals are loners or have forms of sociality that we might not recognize as mammalian, like naked mole rats who live in hives, sort of, with a queen and workers like ants. But all mammals are social, and they are often very social, we'll say. All mammals have three ear bones. Um, that's what, the hammer, the stirrup, and the anvil. I forget the Latin names. You won't need to remember them uh, for this class at least. But I would like you to know that mammals have three ear bones. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They have expanded cortexes. Versus their reptilian ancestors, mammals have a lot more of the wiggly, curly matter at the top and front of the brain. You know what part I'm talking about. It looks like it's all wrinkled up. That top and front part of your brain is the cortex, and mammals have expanded their cortexes. Mammals provide care for their juvenile offspring, or most of them do. That is, mammals take care of their kids. This is a good way to ensure that your genes get passed on. If there's any mammals out there who are worried about their genes getting passed on, this is what they would do. Not to say that mammals are actually worried about their genes. By the way, this is not a baby capybara here. This is a capybara, and this is not a baby capybara. This is a guinea pig. They're rodents. Anyway, rodents are mammals. Okay. Mammals communicate by smell, sight, sound, and touch. And it's not these four senses in particular that are important for us, but rather the fact that they communicate with all of these. And we're going to call that multimodal communication. We will talk about that shortly. Mammals have an extended life as juveniles. We call that extended ontogeny. Again, we'll talk about that shortly. What this means is, versus their reptilian ancestors, mammals take a long time to grow up. They don't become adults right away. They have a long period of time when they are learning how to be adults. Finally, mammals produce milk, or the females do. Well, the males can as well, just their mammary glands tend to be atrophied. But females produce milk for their young, and this, again, is part of providing care for juvenile offspring. So we're going to go a little further today with the classifications, but we won't get to all of these traits in today's lecture. But let's go over the list anyway. We humans, we are primates, members of the order Primates. Primates, they have hands. That means they have four fingers and a thumb. And they have nails. Primates generally do not have claws on their hands and feet, but have fingernails, like you do, or toenails, like you do. Primates have stereoscopic vision, like this guy here and this guy here. Their eyes are on the front of their face, and what that does is it creates a zone of overlapping vision between each one of the two eyeballs, and they use that for depth perception. Primates are even more intensely social than most mammals. They invest even more in their offspring, and they take even longer to grow up. Okay, we humans are also hominoids, or apes, members of the family Hominidae. So hominoids are characterized by having shortened lumbar vertebrae to provide trunk support. The lumbar vertebrae, and we will talk about this in the future, but the lumbar vertebrae are the vertebrae in your lower back. And these are shortened versus other primates. Apes and humans have very short lumbar vertebrae. and they're thick. And the reason they're like that is to hold up our torsos. Even if you're not bipedal, like this human fella right here, you do have to hold your torso up as an ape, like this gorilla is doing, and so his lumbar vertebrae are going to be short. All apes have lengthened arms, and that's an adaptation for brachiation. So in most apes, the arms tend to be longer than the legs, not in humans, but we still have very long arms. Certainly versus other primates, apes have proportionally long arms, and what that is for is that's for brachiation, which is a form of locomotion that you do by swinging from overhead branches and vines and things like that. Apes have even larger cortexes than most other mammals, and they are even more intensely social, invest more in their offspring, and they take even longer to grow up. And finally, apes use tools. All apes can use tools. We humans are humans. We're members of the genus Homo. And here we have I've had examples of each taxon, uh, pictures of each taxon with the categories themselves, and these are all humans here. Here's a contemporary Homo sapiens. I think his name is Anil Agrawal, and he's from Allahabad. I don't know, I found him on the internet. He's an attorney. This is supposed to be a Neanderthal person. This is supposed to be a Homo erectus, although I don't know. And this is a reconstruction of a Homo floresiensis, otherwise known as the hobbits. We'll learn about them later. This is Flo. All humans are united by having a fully bipedal stance. So humans walk on two legs. They don't knuckle walk like apes. They don't tend to brachiate like apes. And they don't walk on four limbs like other mammals. They walk on two. Humans, their cortex is so grossly enlarged that we actually are going to call it a neocortex, a new cortex. It's just they have very large brains proportionally compared to other mammals. They're even more intensely social, invest even more in their offspring, and take even longer to grow up. And they also, in addition to passing through evolution and passing through evolutionary adaptation, humans are able to adapt to their environments using technology. That is, if there's a problem humans have in their environment, they can try to figure it out by rearranging the materials in that environment into tools and then using those tools to solve their problems. Other apes can probably also do this, but this is really something that unites all members of the genus Homo. And finally, Homo sapiens. All these people here are Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens, or wise men, yeah, right, are characterized by lacking significant prognathism. That means their jaws don't jut out of their faces very much, like a chimpanzee or gorilla, right? Everybody here is relatively flat-faced. We have reduced dentition, which means our teeth are actually quite small. We'll talk about that later. And we have gracile features, which means that we are kind of delicately built compared to other humans. Our brains have gotten even bigger. We are even more intensely social. We invest more in our children, and we take even longer to grow up. And something that unites all members of the species Homo sapiens is language. Although remember what I told you in the first lecture about picking out traits that define species. All of these traits that I've given you for all of these categories are suspect. And this last one for Homo sapiens, linguistic potential, is also perhaps suspect. But every human I know talks, so, or could talk, or if they had the organs to talk, or, yeah. Right, well, obviously, some people have neural differences that disallow them from speaking. Some people have lost their voices due to injuries or um, other sorts of issues. But Homo sapiens, it can talk. Okay, so something I want you to keep in mind about lists of traits like these is I'm not listing to you a series of traits that exist independently of one another and somehow just have their own stories. Rather, these lists of traits are functional complexes. And a functional complex, following Sherwood-Washburn, who we discussed a little bit before, is a set of traits that together suit an organism to its environment, right? Remember, natural selection acts upon whole organisms, not on single traits. And here is the recreation of horse evolution, recreation of horse phylogeny by George Gaylord Simpson. And remember, right, the changes in horses' teeth, in their limbs, and in their body size together, not individually, but together, suited them for life in their changing environment as the great North American forests receded and gave way to the great North American plains. Remember, or maybe I haven't mentioned this before, but if I haven't, now's a good time to note this. George Gaylord Simpson defines an adaptation as the body plus the behavior in an environment, right? Adaptation makes no sense as adaptations unless all three of these pieces are together. Imagine a hummingbird. A hummingbird has a long beak and a long tongue, which it inserts into flowers so it may drink, and it of course lives in an environment among flowers with long tubes and nectar for it to feed upon. So if you take any one of these three pieces away, the nectar, the hovering behavior, inserting the beak into the flower, or the beak itself, then the hummingbird's adaptation as a nectar feeder is not adaptive. It doesn't make any sense. So not only would I like you to think of all these traits that I'm describing today of mammals as existing together in a functional complex, but I want you to think of the whole environment, behavior plus body situation as itself a complex, and we may call that complex an adaptation. So when I talk to you about mammalian traits today, um, maybe even make a chart as I go, where you're listing the anatomy, the behaviors that you do with that anatomy, or that any mammal might do with that anatomy, and then the environmental context in which that anatomy was useful. And remember, the environmental context does change. That creates problems, as the Baron George Cuvier pointed out, but it also is the impetus for evolution. So again, all these mammalian traits, these are a functional complex of mammalian features, and together what they produce is they produce a specific flexibility. Mammals are very flexible organisms. Um, this is not to say that other kinds of life are not flexible. Life as a whole is quite flexible. That's why there are so many kinds of it. But these traits together produce a certain flexibility in terms of the kinds of environments that mammals can live in. So let's talk about mammals. Oh, I hope I can remember how all this goes. Well, mammals, they evolved from therapsid reptiles. And therapsids are reptiles that lived somewhere between 275 and 100 million years ago. That would have been in the first period during which there were dinosaurs. Actually, they may have popped up at the end of the Permian with the sort of proto-dinosaurs. So mammals evolved from this very old lineage of reptiles known as therapsids. Perhaps the well, if you like to watch late night BBC nature documentaries, then the most well-known therapsid may be the gorgonopsids, which are what these guys here are. But if you like like old children's books about dinosaurs, this guy, Dimetrodon, may be familiar to you, right? You remember he's a four-legged guy, he's got a big sail on his back. So the first mammals evolved from therapsid reptiles, and therapsid reptiles lived from 275 million to 100 million years ago. Um, an early precursor to mammals. Now, obviously, not all therapsids turned into mammals. Therapsids, like any other group of living things, diversified and went in many different directions. And one of the directions that eventually led to mammals was called the cynodonts. So, if we talk about the ancestors of the mammals, the direct reptilian ancestors of mammals were the cynodont therapsids. And here we have a Cherasognathus, which is an example of a cynodont therapsid, possibly one of the first mammals, depending on how you look at these things. Two different reconstructions of them. They would have been living about here, which I guess is about 220 million years ago. Right? It's sort of a strange creature. It looks like a reptile. Its legs stick out to the side, although these front limbs are underneath the body. We'll get to that. But it's got this heterodont dentition. It's got different kinds of teeth in its mouth. And it has whiskers. Recent reconstructions of some therapsid or cynodont therapsids have suggested that they had whiskers. They can tell because whiskers are connected to nerves inside your skull, and those nerves have tiny holes around the mandible and the maxilla in the skull. So if you look at your cat or your dog and you feel the bone underneath their whiskers, know that those whiskers are attached to nerves that go through holes in the skull. And you can see these holes on the skulls of some cynodont therapsids. So maybe the first hair was whiskers. Anyway. So there's sort of a question about what is the first mammal that we know of. The oldest one that's a candidate for being a real mammal is this little guy here, Morganeucodon, who lived maybe 205 million years ago. They don't have a lot of Morganeucodon fossils, and it's really not quite been determined if they actually are mammals. I believe they have some dentition, which suggests that they are mammals. That is, they have some teeth, which suggests that they are mammals because mammals have certain kinds of teeth, which we'll talk about. But Morganeucodon's up in the air. The earliest confirmed mammal is Hadrocodium, who lived about 195 million years ago. That would have put him right at the division between the the Jurassic and the Triassic periods, right? So remember, dinosaurs lived in the Jurassic, the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. And so the first mammals would have popped up right at this boundary between the Triassic and the Jurassic. Hydrocodium, as you can see, was very tiny, and they don't have his whole skeleton here, or they do have some more material now. But when this image was released, I think it was the cover of Discover magazine, all they really had was the skull. And as you can see, the skull is very tiny, smaller than a paperclip. But it had some distinctive mammalian features, including ear bones separated from his jaw. Now, I bring up this character, Alphodon. He's painted to look like a possum. He's not a possum. He is an early mammal, and he lived about 65 million years ago, which is when the dinosaurs died out. So we have Hadrocodium, our first confirmed mammal, at 195 million years, and then we have Alphodon at 65 million years. And there are some definite changes. For instance, Alphodon has his limbs underneath the body, like a contemporary mammal does. Morganeucodon, and we don't know so much about Hadrocodium, but these guys are reconstructed as having their limbs kind of still out to the sides a little bit, like reptiles. There's differences, but overall, what we're looking at is we're looking at about 130 million years of little ratty guys. So for this first long chunk of mammalian evolution, this long period of time when there were mammals, it's only 130 million years, or 135. Why did I say 135 here? It's clearly 130. 195 minus 65, right? Anyway, whatever. So for this long period of time, mammals are basically doing the same thing. Sure, they're diversifying, they're changing, but they're basically little ratty guys. About this period of time, the largest mammals that were around were maybe the size of small dogs, and they were predators, but they were still basically operating within this I'm too small for the dinosaurs to bother with paradigm. Now, this body form worked because of these three traits. So you should write these down. The earliest mammals were nocturnal, they were arboreal, and they were insectivorous. This means they came out at night, they lived in trees, and they probably ate insects. This is what you would expect from a bunch of little guys trying to live underfoot of a group of diverse and relatively large creatures, dinosaurs. Right? Remember, the story here is that dinosaurs during the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods were so diverse and so successful as a group that they filled many of the niches on land, many of the possible job openings on land. A niche, remember, is it's sort of like an organism's profession. It's what it does for a living. And all of the jobs were taken up by dinosaurs, so to speak. So the one job that was definitely left over was little ratty guy who comes out at night, lives in trees, and eats insects. And this is just, of course, the interpretation we have from the fossil evidence. They have nocturnal, arboreal, and insectivorous adaptations that show up in the skeletal material. Or rather, the nocturnal part is slightly conjectural, but we'll get to that. Now I'm going to show you a tree shrew skeleton in a moment here, and I would like you to learn the bones, or learn enough of the bones so that you will be able to understand what I'm talking about as I discuss bones here and there and later on. The typical mammal skeleton that I'm going to be showing you is the skeleton of a tree shrew. This is a tree shrew. It's not a shrew, it's just called a tree shrew. Shrews are members of the order Insectivora, which includes shrews, North American moles, hedgehogs, and a few other creatures that you may be less familiar with. Tree shrews are members of a different order that is related to primates. In fact, they often get used, these tree shrews, they often get used as representations of what the first primates might have looked like. But anyway, so this is a contemporary living creature today, a tree shrew, and let's see here. This is what he looks like on the inside. So this is right from the coloring book, if you happen to have it. It's 3/7. This is a good panel to color in because you do need to learn bones to understand something about how our bodies have evolved. So the skeleton in the coloring book is broken into two sections, and we'll talk about both of them right here. So there is the axial skeleton, okay? And the axial skeleton, it's the axis upon which the rest of the body turns. So it's everything from the head, through the neck, down the back, the hips, and the tail. That's the axial skeleton. All right, so parts of the axial skeleton that I want you to know are mostly vertebrae. Well, let's start with the skull. So here's the skull. This whole thing is called a skull. This top part is called a cranium. This is called the mandible. Your lower jaw is your mandible. Your upper jaw is its own bone, actually. It's called the maxilla. It is grown into the cranium. So this is your maxilla, your mandible, and your cranium. All of this is a skull. Vertebrae come in different types. Your cervical vertebrae are in your neck. Your thoracic vertebrae are in your chest. They are the ones with ribs. Your lumbar vertebrae, very important for us to understand apes, is your lower back. Your sacral vertebrae, you can't see very well in this picture. It's the vertebrae that attach to your pelvis. And then your caudal vertebrae is what you have in your tail, if you have one. The other part of the skeleton is the appendicular skeleton, the appendages. So your appendages include your forelimbs. The bones in your forelimbs are this. This is your humerus in your upper arm. This one is your ulna. Letter I on this image is your ulna. You can find your ulna because it's the one, you tap on your elbow, you're tapping on your ulna, right? And then you can feel, if you put your fingers on your elbow and work your way up your forearm as it's folded against your shoulder, that hard bone that you can follow all the way up to your wrist is your ulna. The ulna is complemented by the radius, and the radius is on the other side of your wrist. It's the other one of the two bones you can feel right below your wrist. It's the radius because it radiates, right? This is the bone that moves around in your arm as you rotate your hand. Let's skip this for now. We'll go to the hind limbs. So the hind limbs, the big bone in your hind limb is your femur. That's the one in your thigh. You probably can't feel that. If you can feel your femur, you might be in trouble because it's supposed to be covered up in a lot of muscle, at least in humans. Then there is the tibia. The tibia is the one that is in the front of your shin. It's the one that you hit on the furniture all the time. And then there's the fibula, which is behind your tibia. You probably can't find your fibula very easily. Yeah, you might be able to find it if you push really hard into the back of your ankle and up a little bit. But again, it's supposed to be behind a lot of muscle. If you have too easy of a time finding your fibula, you might want to see a doctor. Then let's go to the girdles. So there are two girdles. There is a pectoral girdle and there is a pelvic girdle. Your pectoral girdle is composed of a scapula. Your scapula is your shoulder blade. And you want to know what a scapula is because we're going to be following this bone as it moves around on mammals' bodies. Our scapulae are in very different positions from the scapulae of other mammals, and this is a key characteristic of humans and apes. Your pectoral girdle, rather, also includes your clavicle, which is your collarbone. On this guy, it seems to just be kind of extending downward. You know where your own collarbone is. It's the couple of bones that extend to either side of your neck. The pectoral girdle is, this is your pectoral girdle, rather the pelvic girdle. You could also just call it your pelvis. For now, just all of this is the pelvis. Actually, no, let's go ahead and let's just cover these pieces. This will be easier once we get a human pelvis, but okay. The ilium is the top part of your pelvis. Now on you, it's your hip bone. So if you poke your fingers into the sides of your hips on either side, that bone is your ilium. Ilia is the plural for ilium. In humans, the ilium is broad and scoop-shaped. In this little guy, it's shaped sort of like a blade. The pubis is the front part of the pelvis. This is the bone in your pubic area. So if you press down on that, you can find your pubis very easily. Your ischium is what you sit on. So on this guy, the ischium's back here. I'll show you again when we get to a human. And then your acetabulum is the socket for the femur. It's where the femur plugs in to the pelvis. And altogether, one half of the pelvis is known as an innominate, which means nameless. Okay. All right. So this skeletal format is really flexible, as it turns out. Mammals have gone in all sorts of directions with this pretty basic skeletal format. From our quote unquote typical mammal, the tree shrew, uh, we can see how other kinds of mammals have adapted pieces of their skeletons, and this is actually a very important point to be made for evolutionary theory. All of these creatures, they are using the same bones for different things. So, of course, humans, we have our hands here. The walrus, he has hands, not like us. He has forelimbs that use the same bones, right? He's got a humerus, he's got an ulna and a radius, and he's got phalanges. That's the name of the finger bones. But they don't do anything like what a human hand does. They paddle in the water. This guy's a gibbon. He's an ape. He's very similar to a human, as you can see, but he has very long arms. Right? His arms are adapted for brachiation. So he's actually a specialist at brachiation. That is that overhead swinging from the trees kind of movement that we'll talk about more later. An anteater has adapted his forelimbs for breaking open anthills. Sloth, although you can't see his forelimbs, has adapted them for hanging out in trees. Sloths and anteaters are members of the same group. This guy is a moropus. It's a kind of extinct mammal. Comes in, well, this thing was very confusing for folks when they dug it up because it's got a horse-like head. It's got these big claws on its feet. It's got hind limbs like a predatory animal, like a carnivorous creature like a cat. They didn't really know how to put it together. It was actually Baron Cuvier who figured out that all these different pieces are actually members of the same body. And he had these big claws on his forelimbs for whatever reason. You can also look at the dentition. Here's somebody who's eating grass. Here's somebody who's eating cooked food, very small teeth. These are specialized teeth used for breaking open clams and digging in the soil, the digging in the seabed. Here are some teeth that are pretty good for eating fruit. You may notice the gibbon has long canines. That's good for display purposes. This guy has teeth just in the back of his mouth, maybe. I'm not even sure that sloths and anteaters have teeth. I think they have them just in the back of their mouths. They don't really need them. Not to the well. I guess sloths must have teeth. They eat leaves. Anteaters certainly don't. They don't need them. They just kind of lap up ants with their tongue. I'm sure you're familiar with anteaters. So anyway, just the diversity of mammal skeletons. It's a very flexible format. Having these four limbs sticking out of an axial skeleton, it goes places. So let's talk about those mammalian traits now. So to start off with, reptiles, they are distinguished by having these homodont teeth, all right? So you look inside of a reptile's mouth, and all the teeth are basically the same. We'll start with the crocodile. He's just got, or she has just got these pegs, these sharp pegs. They're good for catching fish. That's all the crocodile needs. Good enough. This is an iguana, and there's a little bit of diversity in his teeth, but really not much. They're all about the same size and shape. Most of them are these little leaf-shaped teeth, and these are good for eating leaves and vegetables, the sorts of things that iguanas like to eat. At any rate, the reptiles generally have just one type of tooth in their mouths, and we call that homodont dentition. By contrast, mammals have heterodont dentition. So if we take a look at these three primates, we can look at their teeth and we can see how having multiple kinds of teeth uh, that can be specialized for certain tasks are useful. Um, so first of all, just to introduce you to the mammalian mouth, mammals, let's look at this guy because he's closer. The manga bee is closest to us. He has incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. So you have these same teeth in the same numbers and positions as the manga bee. That is, you have two incisors, one canine, two premolars, and one, two, three molars. We call this a dental formula. The dental formula for humans, for all apes, and for all old world monkeys, all monkeys who live in Africa, Asia, or Europe, is 2, 1, 2, 3. You might write that down. Human dental formula. Or really, the group that we're talking about is called the catarrhines. I'll tell you about them more later. Actually, you'll see them in the bone demo that I will be putting up for you. But the dental formula is 2, 1, 2, 3, and that's incisors, canines, premolars, molars. Now these other guys, they have incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. They just have them in different numbers. This howler monkey here is a New World monkey. He has 2, 1, 3, 3. New World monkeys, monkeys in South America, actually have one extra premolar over what humans, apes, and Old World monkeys have. And they share the same or very similar dental formula with prosimians or non-monkey, non-ape primates. We'll speak about primate classification in more precise terms later, but again, just look. This guy has 2 incisors, 1 canine, 1, 2, 3 premolars, and 1, 2, 3 molars. He has a specialized sort of incisor canine combination called a dental comb. We'll talk about that a little later when we actually talk about these guys. But again, it's the same teeth. Now that we've seen the similarities, let's check out some of the differences here. The manga bee is a fruit eater. And, well, I mean, his teeth are not too different from ours. The incisors are sort of like flat blades. The canines are sharp pegs. And the premolars and the molars are sort of these bladed cusps, right? There's sort of a blade on the outside and a blade on the inside. And what this is good for is his diet, which is fruit or other sort of high nutrition, hard to find food items. This is great for slicing into a chunk of fruit, taking a bite, chewing it up into bits that you can digest and swallowing it. The howler monkey is a leaf eater. So you'll notice his incisors are not these flat blades. They are these sort of sharp pegs. Can't really see them from the side. He also, like the manga bee, has these conical peg-leg canines. Canines are useful for eating, but they are also useful for display. So primates tend to have showy canines. We tend to like to show off our canines. Not so much humans. We'll talk about why that is later. But look at this guy's premolars and his incisors compared to the incisors here. This guy's a leaf eater. Leaves are very easy to find in the environment, very available food source, but leaves are not all that nutritious compared to fruit in terms of the energy you get out of them. You got to put a lot of energy into chewing leaves in order to get much out of them, right? Remember, it was the problem that horses faced on the Great Plains. And so he has these kind of low, almost pointed molars that he can just grind away at the leaves with. He also has a specialized digestive system to deal with the leaves. The slender loris here is an insectivore. He hunts insects, and that's what he eats. And you can see this reflected in his dentition pretty readily. His top incisors are just little sharp pegs, almost reptilian. these premolars, you can see much better on the side here, are sharp pegs. They don't look like the sorts of premolars that other kinds of primates have. And then his molars even just kind of operate as these two knives, 1, 2, 1, 2 knives. And that's good for just capturing an insect, holding it down, killing it quickly, and then crunch, 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 and swallowing. So this heterodont dentition, this having an array of different kinds of teeth in your mouth, this is quite flexible, and even in one group of mammals like primates, we can see the flexibility of heterodont dentition. Heterodont dentition is also very useful for display. This here is a rhesus macaque, one of my monkeys. Well, I mean, I don't know this guy personally. I think this is from a book called Primates. It's just a photo essay of primate faces. This is a young rhesus. Maybe it's hard to tell if he's a male or a female. He's just a little guy. He looks like he's smiling. This is a fear face. This is a pretty stressed out face, or it could be a mild threat. Either way, it's a stressed out face. We humans, we conserve actually a lot of this same behavior. It looks like a human smile because, well, when do you smile? You smile to diffuse potentially difficult social situations, like when you first meet somebody, right? You don't know who this person is. Are they a threat? Are they a jerk? Well, you smile, better smooth things over. A smile is also related to a grimace, which is a show of disgust. And so this guy is sort of smiling, grimacing. It's a fear face. He's fearful. What I was getting at is just that there are these connections between the facial expressions of humans and other primates, but they are actually quite different when we get down to the nitty-gritty. I will show you some rhesus macaque faces later on. Maybe not today. But this is a fear face, and important for the fear face is that the lips are pulled back and the teeth are bared. Here, this is a tree shrew. You can see right inside his little mouth, and you can look, oh look, there's molars, premolars, canines, and incisors. Pretty standard mammal setup here. Here are some other mammals. Whales, they've diverged quite a bit from the mammalian pattern. Obviously, they've gone and taken up lifestyles that are different from that of any other mammal, and they don't need the same sort of dentition that other mammals do. They are filter feeders. They have baleen instead of teeth, although as embryos they still have teeth. The baleen comes about before they're born, but after they are conceived. So just in case you've never seen inside a whale's mouth, here's his upper palate, and this here is his tongue. This guy's been killed. He's on a whaling ship, but you can see what's going on inside there. Here's a cat. You're familiar with this. Canines. Good for display, but also good for puncturing the jugular veins of little rodents. Some incisors. Cats and other carnivores, they don't really have premolars and molars. They have teeth they call carnassials, which are evolved from molars and premolars. They are shearing teeth, good for cutting meat off of bone. They still, are heterodont dentition bearers. This here is a gelada baboon. Baboon, sure. He's a baboon relative. It's a gelada. These are big baboon-like monkeys. Live in Ethiopia. He's doing what's called a flip face, where these guys actually take their upper lip and they flip it backwards over their face, and they bare their huge fangs. And this is a use of the canines for display. This guy is probably displaying to another male gelada, saying, "Back off." In addition to having heterodont dentition, mammals tend to have an emphasized olfactory sense. That is your sense of smell. Olfaction is your sense of smell, and we call the smell nerves the olfactory receptors. Well, I'm not going to do too much with this anatomy here. I would like to point out that Mammals with large muzzles tend to have more olfactory nerves and a larger olfactory bulb, which is part of the brain, than creatures with less muzzle. So we have a big nasal cavity inside of our heads. That's good. It helps us to speak and to say this and that, to form sounds. But because our faces have been tucked in underneath our big brains, we have pretty small olfactory bulbs, pretty small muzzles, not a lot of room for olfactory nerves. These here are the olfactory nerves. They are held in place by something called a cribriform plate, which is a piece of bone at the top of the nasal cavity. You'll notice on the lemur, which is a primate, but a different kind of primate from us, that the lemur has a large cribriform plate with lots of little holes poked in it. The human has just a small one with fewer holes, and those holes would be what would be supporting the olfactory nerves. So humans, not very good sense of smell. Other primates, perhaps. Mammals in general have an emphasized olfactory sense. So that is, mammals in general have a very good sense of smell. It's very useful in mammalian communication, like you see these two guys here. These are two male ring-tailed lemurs. It's hard to tell what they're doing from the picture, but they are having a stink fight where they are basically trying to outstink the other. They have scent glands around their tails, and they are trying to outstink each other in a combat. I guess it's a lot better than throwing blows or biting. But in this case, it's just a way of communicating. You may have heard of something called pheromones. Humans also have pheromones. They are just hormones given off into the air and detected by olfactory receptors that trigger the release of other hormones inside of our own bodies. Pheromones, as you know, probably are related to sex drive and affection, things like that. So, like I was saying, that emphasized olfactory sense, it helps us to find food and locate predators, right? Because food smells. Everybody knows what their food smells like. It helps us locate predators, right? It's hard to sneak up on somebody who can smell you coming. It keeps the social group together, keeps the mammalian social group together. And it does this by acting as a form of communication. So here we have a tigress, and she is urinating on the tree, or this could be a male actually, I'm not sure. But they're urinating on the tree in order to mark it with its scent, right? And that tree will bear that smell, and other tigers in the area can smell that and say, okay, this is somebody else's tree. And they might pee on it too, say, nope, this is mine now, or they might leave. So in that way, it's a social, not always social cohesion because the tigers aren't necessarily hanging out together, but they could recognize family members by smell, for instance. But in this case, this is sort of smell as a way of ordering tiger society by peeing on trees. Also, like I said, pheromones, right? Cologne, perfume, these are often they smell like things in the environment, but they are also in some ways sort of simulated pheromones. Um, Even though we have reduced muzzles, as you can see on this woman, uh, we are also still sort of beholden to the world of smell. In addition to that emphasized olfactory sense, we've got middle ear bones. This is what I mentioned before. Here's your eardrum. Well, this is a cat, actually, but it works the same way for you. So there's your pinna, the outside part of your ear. Here's your kitty's ear. The canal, the ear canal. So sound is vibrations in the air. These vibrations in the air in the canal cause the eardrum to move. The eardrum causes let's see here, the hammer to hit the anvil, which vibrates the stirrup, which vibrates the fluid inside this organ, the cochlea. And the cochlea, the vibrations of the cochlea's fluids are picked up by nerves that go to the brain and translate the vibrations into sound images. These middle ear bones, what they do is that they are a more efficient way of transmitting sound from here in the ear canal to here in the cochlea. Um, Reptiles, these three bones are parts of their jaw, and they would use one bone to transmit sound. These three bones allow mammals to actually hear high frequencies that reptiles can't hear. And so mammals are better at discerning pitch. Um, what does that mean? Well, have you ever seen a Charlie Brown special? And, those specials, it's cartoons, right? Charlie Brown, the Peanuts Gang. It's all about the kids. And whenever adults speak, they always sound like this. Wah, 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 wah. Right? So the kids always know what the adults are saying, but you as the viewer, you never understand what the adults are saying. And so, actually, I brought this up for a reason. Mammals can discern pitch better than reptiles. And so, try having a conversation with an alligator. It's not going to be able to tell the difference between the high points in, well, just listen to me right now. Right? I'm talking in a pretty even tone, but there are high points in my pitch and there are low points in my pitch. And if you were a reptile who did not have these three ear bones acting together, instead having only one ear bone, you might just hear, instead of distinct sounds, you might just hear from me, wah, 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 wah. Um, Finally, what I want to do with this is this emphasized olfactory sense, this great sense of smell that mammals have, and these middle ear bones that allow us to hear sound in a more fine-tuned way. These open up a new possibility for animals. Well, rather, the middle ear bones open up a new possibility for communication via complex sounds. But these together do open up a new possibility for animals. I hope it's on the next slide. No, it's not. Well, let's just go back for a second. I'm leading up to something, and I want you to follow me here. There is the emphasized olfactory sense, the middle ear bones. Okay, these are two senses. Just mark them down. Mammal senses. And remember that as the middle ear bones open up the possibility of communication via complex sounds, these two things are going to work together in something called multimodal communication that I just haven't gotten to yet, but it's ahead. Just a few more slides. So something else about mammals. And actually, this is going to pertain to to the things that I was just talking about in a moment, is that mammals have hair. You know that. You know what hair does too. It insulates your body, repels the elements. It's great if you're a beaver, all the water just comes off, and you're kept warm. There's a duck back there. He has feathers that do a very similar thing. Keep the water off, keep him warm. Hair can also be used for defense. This is a porcupine. This is what happens when your dog fights a porcupine. This is awful looking, and I'm sure this poor dog was in major trouble. Uh, she could have died. She lived. This one was. I had to look this picture up on Snopes. It's real, and this dog did survive. She's a pit bull, if you can tell. Oh man, look at that. So much surgery. Porcupines, they can mess you up. Hair can be used for defense. Anyway, most mammals don't actually use hair for defense. I just really wanted to show you that picture. Mostly it keeps their bodies warm and repels the elements. Elements like the pit bull element. Finally, hair can be used for camouflage or display, which are kind of opposite things in a way, right? So this tiger, did you see it? Hiding in the grass? Don't look at me. Nothing but grass here. Display, this duker. It's a kind of small antelope. Just looks like the dirt. Same color as everything around him. If he was hiding over here, you wouldn't see him. But it can also be used for display. So we got Fabio here. Fabio, he has great hair. I don't know why people knock Fabio so much. He's a good-looking guy, maybe a little overdone. But hey, he's played it really hard. He made quite a living off of it, off of romance novel covers. But this guy is also displaying. What is this guy displaying? Well, this guy here is displaying. He's displaying, "Hi, I'm sexy." He's actually trying to say something about a romance novel cover. Hi, you will find sexy times inside this book. This guy is displaying, um, well, he could be displaying his allegiance to a certain group of people, um, but I tend to think that the number one thing that this man is displaying with his huge beard is his age and seniority. It takes a long time to grow a big beard, and I know if you're 22 years old and you have a mustache, you know this too. It's not the same thing as having Tom Selleck's mustache. You got to be a little older for that. And so you can display your age pretty well with facial hair, especially facial hair. Although, never mind. Some of us just never gonna get there. Anyway, mammals have hair that can also be used for, well, I mean, like I said, camouflage and display, but it also works both ways. So look at this cat. So in some circumstances, this nice mottled, uh, kind of tawny pattern would be useful for hiding. But look what else he's doing. Look at his tail. You know what sort of mood this cat's in. This cat is freaked out. This cat sees something he doesn't like. The lion here, color is great for hiding, great for blending in, but also he's got a mane, which is display. Shows this is sexual selection at work here. This is a male trying to show his fitness to the ladies, if they can see him. So something about hair is that hair needs to be groomed. You can't just have it. It tends to collect dirt and dust. And so one ubiquitous behavior among mammals, one behavior that you find in any mammal with hair, is grooming, and even some without hair, right? You still got to keep your skin in order. But anyway, so grooming. And grooming is so important to mammal life that the patterns of grooming for many mammals exhibits something called stereotypy. So what do I mean by stereotypy? Well, so you see these rats. Okay, so if I were there in front of you, I would be demonstrating on my hair with my hands, but you're going to have to just imagine with these rats. And if you've had a rat, you would also recognize this. Rats tend to have certain patterns in how they groom. So this guy might groom down with his right, down with his left, down with his right, down with his left. Or he might go down, down, right, down, left, down, right, down, left. Individual mammals often exhibit stereotyped patterns for how they groom. And so what that means is that, like this rat, the patterns that he uses for grooming, for combing his hair, are actually imprinted genetically. So he would inherit the pattern of swipes he makes with his claws against his head. He would inherit that pattern from his parents. Which only goes to show, well, two things really. First of all, how old grooming behavior is. It's so old that it's gotten time to be locked in. And it's so important that it has had to be locked in. It was really important, right, for the first mammals, who were not big thinkers like humans necessarily, but it's really important to be able to groom in an effective manner. And so that's one of the things that mammals are quote unquote programmed to do. Many mammals are programmed to groom in certain manners, like down, left, down, right, down, left, down, right. You should go find a squirrel out in a park somewhere and just sit and watch and see if you can catch him doing some stereotyped grooming patterns. Cats are maybe a little less stereotyped, but if you have a cat, you can watch for patterns there too. It might be learned in the case of your cat, or it might be something inherited from their parents. You'd have to have a whole sample of many generations of cats to test that one. Um, Grooming is also a great way to socialize, okay? It strengthens emotional bonds, alleviates tension, and it cleans hair and removes parasites. And so, mammals being social, grooming is a great thing. It's a good deed you can do for other mammals. And so, baboons, they do it all the time. It alleviates tensions in the baboon troop. It keeps them from beating each other up. This little baboon is showing some I guess a little bit of friendship, perhaps, or perhaps subordination to this larger baboon. These girls, they are grooming each other, they're pals, and you know what I'm talking about, ladies. You had a sleepover, and what did you do at the sleepover? You brushed each other's hair. Or I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never been invited to a sleepover with a bunch of teenage girls, but and I at this point in my life I would not accept the invitation. Uh, but I hear that there's a lot of grooming that goes on. But grooming is also so important for mammals that we tend to groom even other mammals not of our species. So this little vervet monkey is friends with the cat. And how did they get to be friends? Well, probably by playing first, and then by hanging out and grooming each other. And that relaxes each other and their bond strengthens. It's just like what you do with your cat. You know, has your kitty ever tried to groom you? Yeah. Your dog? Yeah. And then what do? You sit there and you pet your dog, or you have your cat on your lap and you pet her behind the ears for an hour. That's grooming. I mean, it's also a way of showing affection, right? It's not just one thing or the other. So another mammalian trait, and I hope you're writing these down because I'm building up to something here, is endothermy, which is warm-bloodedness. Now, reptiles, they are ectothermic. That means their body temperature relies on the outside temperature. That's why you find snakes and lizards sitting on rocks, warming up. This is a little western fence lizard. This is exactly the kind of guy you find around outside. Um, uh, really anywhere. You can find them on Cabrillo campus for sure. De Anza campus. I've been showing this film to a few of my De Anza students as well as my Cabrillo students, so you can find them all over. I certainly have some living near my house, and this guy also. I don't have any of them living near my house, but again, ectothermic, he needs to bask, right? In order to get the heat necessary to get your muscles moving, to get your blood pumping, and to digest any food that might be in your stomach, if you are a reptile, you need to bask in the sun. Reptiles don't do very good in cold weather. They have to hibernate or die. Mammals can maintain their own body heat, and that means they can live in settings that are too cold for reptiles. So this guy, his hair, obviously working towards camouflage here, but also helping to maintain body heat. There's just no way a reptile could ever be happy like this in the snow. They'd freeze. And it's not just about climate, it's also about time of day. Reptiles tend not to be active at night. There are a few species of nocturnal reptile. Uh, Probably the number one that comes to mind are the different kinds of geckos that are found around the world. They are nocturnal lizards with big eyes, and they've adapted to that lifestyle. You notice geckos only live in places where they have warm nights. You find them in India, you find them in Florida, Mexico, you find them in South America, uh, you find them in Hawaii. Warm nights. Mammals, however, because they're endothermic, can come out at night, right? Oh, okay. Most mammals give live birth, but live birth is not something that only mammals do. In fact, live birth has evolved several separate times among different kinds of organisms. So here we have a shark giving live birth to its offspring. The scorpion is popping out baby scorpions. Don't worry, they're not sharp yet. And this snake, I believe she's a rubber boa or a sand boa, I guess. She is popping out some little snakelings, some little baby boas. So, and these are not the exact kind of live birth that mammals do. There are many different kinds of live birth. But I want you to know it's not just something that mammals do. It's actually been a strategy that lots of different organisms have hit upon. Um, Here are some great mammals. Uh, Pregnancy, I want you to know, it takes a lot of energy, though. It's kind of a big drain. I'm sure uh, Somebody in the audience understands what I'm talking about. It's way more expensive than just laying an egg and sitting on it, right? Look, you're an elephant. For almost 2 years, you've got to have this thing popping around inside of your body. For almost 2 years, you got to be cooking this little baby elephant in here. And now it pops out. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Almost 2 years of that. Or a beluga, 14 months. Hey, look, little beluga. Now, I don't know why the elephant is coming out. Does this look to you like he's coming out tail first? I don't know why an elephant would come out tail first. But I do know why a whale would come out tail first. Because you're giving birth underwater. You can't have your baby stick out head first and then drown before it's even fully born. Belugas, they always look so happy, even when they're giving birth. So the bonus for giving live birth is that there's a nutritional advantage, right? So if you lay an egg, whatever you've equipped that egg with, you've given it yolk, but whatever is in that shell, that's what that developing embryo has to deal with until it hatches. That's all it gets. And if it wasn't enough, then it doesn't get any more, right? Times can be tough, and you could be a reptile going through tough times. You can't make enough yolk to put in your egg. Your egg doesn't have a lot of yolk in it. Your little baby reptile doesn't have enough yolk to develop fully. Could be a problem. Mammal fetuses, they do eat. You know, they eat. They're connected to their mothers by their umbilical cords. They get their nutrition that way, and that means that they are in a more sensitive relationship with the world around them, even before they are born. So if mother's eating well, baby's eating well. If mother's not eating well, baby is not eating well. And whether or not you're eating well, getting enough nutrition, getting enough oxygen, these affect the way you develop in the womb and can affect your body, can affect your metabolism, and even your personality. And so we might think, oh, okay, well, so mom is pregnant and there are hard times and she's not getting enough food, and so the fetus doesn't get enough nutrition. Well, the changes that go on in that fetus are not going to be totally explained as just didn't get enough nutrition, because the fetus is actually developing in a way that is responsive to the impoverished environment where the mother is not getting enough. And so a fetus who develops inside of a mother who lives in an impoverished environment is actually being prepared in terms of metabolism, in terms of body, and in terms of personality to do better in an impoverished environment. Another advantage of having live birth, another advantage of having pregnancy for a while and then giving live birth is, well, okay, so you've got eggs in you carry them around for a while, but then you lay them. And it's like good luck eggs. You can guard the eggs, but the eggs can't get away if you have to leave. Live young, they can escape from predators. Most mammals, they're born and it's just a couple of hours and then they can run away. So even though they're not done developing, even though they're not done growing up, they can still get away. Eggs, most critters who hatch out of eggs start off pretty much as more or less, something close to an adult. And don't think about birds, but think about reptiles. An alligator who's just hatched out of his egg is basically done. Just needs to get bigger. It's basically got everything going for it already that it's going to have going for it when it's an adult. It just needs to get bigger. Mammals have a lot more that they need to do. In fact, maybe it's here. What's here is the exception of monotremates. Well, we'll talk more about young mammals and the bonuses that they get for taking so long to grow up and being so expensive to give birth to. But then remember, not all mammals do give live birth. Here are the monotremates, members of the class Monotremata, or the order Monotremata, a platypus and an echidna, two species of these guys, one species of this guy. They all lay eggs. These are actually pretty big animals. Platypus is like 2 feet long to 3 feet long, I think. The echidna is probably like a foot and a half long, big, bulky guy. And of course, they live in Australia, not around here. So, okay, now go back to that list of things I've been talking about. This is part one of what I've been trying to get around to. I want to talk about multimodal communication. So, nocturnal sensory adaptations. Okay, this keen hearing that mammals have, this strong olfactory sense, and the ability to communicate vocally, which comes out of a keen hearing. These are all nocturnal sensory adaptations. We got these adaptations during that 130 million year period when we were just little ratty guys running around trying not to get stepped on by dinosaurs, coming out at night. Right? Keen hearing helps you hunt at night. Strong olfactory sense helps you hunt at night, helps keep social groups coherent at night. Vocal communication, it's a great way to communicate at night when you can't see each other. Think about how reptiles communicate. Some of them do communicate with sound, and we think that dinosaurs communicated with sound a lot. But also think about the sorts of communication that you see in reptiles around you today. Think about fence lizards, the little gray spotty guy that I showed you from before. You often see them sitting on a fence post and they're doing push-ups. They're bobbing their little head up and down. And what they're doing is they're showing off, these are males who do the push-ups, they're showing off patches of blue skin underneath their jaws. It's visual communication. But all these things together, the keen hearing, the strong olfactory sense, and the vocal communication, together they added up into this thing called multimodal communication, which is communication through several mediums simultaneously. And think about this, okay? It's like adding bandwidth to the possibilities of reptilian communication, right? So reptiles can only communicate so much information at once because they would probably only be using one mode of communication at once. Or maybe I'm overstating it because, again, reptiles are diverse and they have a lot of different solutions to the things they do. But when you get this multimodal communication, when you get the ability to communicate through different channels, through different mediums at once, not only do you get the ability to add more information to your messages, but you also can add complexity and nuances to those messages by transmitting different messages over different media, whether it's sight or sound or touch or hearing. And so all this together, this multimodal communication, it makes possible very complex forms of sociality, right? Mammals are social specialists, and that has been made possible by the fact that they can do multimodal communication. Multimodal communication also makes possible some of the hallmarks of our species, like culture, writing, performance. If you couldn't communicate through multiple media at once, there'd be no such thing as a play or a movie. It's hard to imagine alligators putting on a play for a lot of reasons, never mind. Also, being able to do multimodal communication, being able to communicate different messages at the same time, makes play possible. And by play, I mean the difference between the bite and the nip. Look at this guy. Is this a vicious dog? Is this somebody you need to fight off? No. But how do you know he's not trying to hurt anyone? I mean, he's got his freaking teeth in your arm, or on your arm. Well, as you probably figured out, there's a lot going on. He's probably not biting that hard. His eyes are not pointed directly forward. He does not have an aggressive look on his face. He's not baring his teeth. His lips are on the arm here. There are multiple messages being sent, and this multiple message, this ability to send multiple messages, allows us to know that he's playing. Allows us to tell the difference between a bite and a nip. This is just a little nip. And what that does is that allows mammals to experiment and to practice doing serious things in playful ways. So, play. It allows young mammals to practice skills and shape neural pathways. Now, I'm not going to say that mammals are the only creatures that play. Uh, I have certainly observed birds play, um, and I'm thinking of uh, parrots, macaws, cockatoos, those kinds of guys. Certainly, I've seen crows play, jays. You could probably think of other creatures. I recently actually saw a video on YouTube of a bearded dragon who was sort of playing. A bearded dragon being a kind of lizard. Um, Play is probably something that all living things do, but let's suffice to say that mammals are specialized for playing. This is part of their long growing up process. During this long growing up process, mammal brains are very plastic. What I mean by plastic or plasticity is the capacity of mammalian brains to change, right? Um, Write this down here. Take a note so you know what I'm talking about when I talk about learning. Um, Probably won't be a big point on an exam or anything, but learning is literally physical changes in your brain that result from interaction with the environment. So what this is, childhood for young mammals, is this period when their brains are very apt to going through changes. And these changes are going to be inspired by the environment that they're in. How we play is how we learn. When little mammals play, like this little elephant kicking his ball around, when little mammals play, they're learning how to do the things that they're going to have to do in their environment. That is, they are programming their brain with the techniques and the abilities that they will need as adults. Part of what makes mammalian brains so plastic is this marked expansion of the cortex. Uh, it's the no, it's kind of funny because I don't really have a picture of a brain right here. Uh, but I've already told you what the cortex is. It's the wiggly, wrinkly part on the top and the front of your brain. You'll see some pictures shortly. I want to make a point while I can that intelligence is not a straight line, right? Let's not think like we're still using the scala naturae when we try to think about what brains do and how intelligent animals are. Remember, different brains, like different bodies, are adapted to different tasks. And so the dolphin, I've already explained to you how dolphins perceive their world through echolocation. The dolphin brain, which is going to be back here, is pretty large, but it's not the size that matters. It's what this dolphin can do with it that matters. The dolphin brain is specialized for receiving and interpreting the vibrations, the sound vibrations that bounce off of fish as fired through the dolphin's melon. So things that human brains are good at, right? We're people. We're not the smartest animals. I mean, just how are you going to compare what a human brain does to what a dolphin brain does to what a mouse brain does? These brains do very different things. And the different things that humans do are language. We're very good at language. We can remember hundreds of faces. So here's language. Here's hundreds of faces. We can imagine future problems and plan for them. We're very good at throwing things. Does this look like somebody painted this beard on this guy to you? Anyway, we're very good at throwing things and calculating where balls and spears go. And we're also very good at remembering manual techniques. We can really program our hands to do things for us to the point where we don't have to think about them. Complicated things like playing instruments or making tools or writing. Writing is a really complicated thing we do with our hands, and we don't think about it too much. Oh, wow, look at all these brains. Can you find the human brain? I think it's this one. Uh, yeah, and I'm not gonna go too far out on a limb. I think this is a whale's brain, and this is an elephant's, I think. But you know what? Hey, you can go to thebrainmuseum.org if you would like to learn more. But just look at these different mammal brains. They're all doing different things. It's not just that this one in the middle is smarter than all the others. It's just they're doing different things. And of course, I could always be wrong. I might have been tricked. This might be a chimp brain. Oh no. So I was talking to you about play and about this period of life through which mammals go through, where they're taking a long time to grow up and they're learning things. Well, this long time to grow up, this is called protracted ontogeny. Ontogeny is an organism's developmental schedule. Okay, and you could think of this as the progression of stages through which an individual passes during their life. For reptiles, it's pretty simple. You're an egg, you hatch, and then you get bigger. And then you lay an egg, which hatches and gets bigger. Now, obviously, there are some differences between this baby alligator and the adult alligator. There's coloration differences, proportional differences. There are behavioral differences. This little guy will make certain noises that will call for his mother, who will come and rescue him for at least a little while after he's been hatched. And then these guys don't make those baby noises anymore. But more or less, reptiles have simple ontogeny. You hatch out of your egg and you grow. You're pretty much an adult from the beginning. Not reproductively, but there's not a lot that you need to do to your body to tweak it to make it suitable for adulthood as a reptile. On the other hand, mammals go through at least 3 distinct stages. Humans perhaps have more. And each of these stages has different bodies, different behaviors and capacities, and different metabolisms. So the first stage is an infant. I think you know what infants are all about. I will often joke when I'm talking about parenting for this class, I will often joke that babies are pretty useless. They kind of just sit there, they're soft and chewy, you know, they can't get away from predators, a big energetic drain on mom and in some species on dad. But this body is doing something. This body is all brain, right? There's like this baby's body is all down here, and her little head is like a third of her body weight. It's all brain. Why is it all brain when she can't even climb a tree or run away? Well, because she's using this well-developed face of hers and her well-developed senses to bring in all this information about the world and put it in here and to start shaping that brain in the really basic ways that she's going to need for the next stage, which is the juvenile. See, there's a theme here. I'm trying to get women with crazy things in their hair. So juvenile, we could break this into many different stages. And if you take a child development class, an early childhood education class, maybe even a psychology class or human anatomy class, you might talk about different stages of juveniles. But a juvenile is basically it's not an infant anymore. It's mobile. It can move around. It can do a lot of the things adults do, but it's mostly not reproductive, mostly cannot have offspring yet, and it's still very plastic, a juvenile. Their brains are still very plastic. So even at this stage where this girl probably thinks that she knows everything, she's still in a state of flux. She's still adapting to the world around her. She might know it all, but she doesn't. Oh, okay. Any parents in the audience? Anyway. The third stage is adult. Right? Woman with crazy things in her hair. The adults, they have bodies who are capable of reproducing, and they have different behaviors and capacities compared to juveniles and infants. Their metabolism slows down. These guys have very high metabolisms. They use a lot of energy, and why is that? Because they have to keep rebuilding these brains in addition to keep growing these bodies. As an adult, well, your metabolism slows down, You don't need to grow your body so much. You just need to kind of maintain the parts that you have. You need to recuperate from injuries. You need to grow new skin because skin's always falling off. Grow new hair. You need to just basically keep things running for a while. Um, and you need to reproduce, perhaps. Well, you don't need to reproduce. Um, Behaviors, capacities, bodies, metabolisms. All right. And let's add a fourth phase, a senior phase. Now, we don't see senior phases in most animals. Um, a senior phase is sort of a new thing, evolutionarily speaking. Humans have a senior phase. This is not just a body that has deteriorated. I know everybody's afraid of getting old, but this woman here is not just the product of deterioration. She's not on her way to dying necessarily. I mean, no more than this little thing here is on her way to dying. This woman, her body is different, and she has different jobs. So we have white hair, gray hair, silver hair, or blue hair. Um, and that's a mark of something. That's a mark of having attained the senior stage. Now, why would seniors have to be marked? Why would they have phenotypes that are different from other phenotypes? It's not just that your hair has lost its ability to produce color. No, this mark is a positive change. It means something. And what it means is, I'm old, pay attention to me. I've been around, I know what's up. We're in a society that values youth. We have a culture that values youth. But this here, this old hair, and even things like wrinkles, and even possibly other changes that are typical of senior bodies, are actually marks that mark a special role in society. All of these different forms of human have different social roles to play. And while I'm not going to be the one to tell you that society is programmed genetically, our genes and our bodies do express manifestations of our society, or rather, there's a back and forth between society and our bodies. The role in most societies of an infant is to just sit there, be taken care of, and learn, do what babies do. The role of children in most societies is to participate in society, but in a sort of apprenticeship manner. We often send children to school, or we often teach them how to do jobs. Um, and of course, they're still supposed to be playing a lot. Adults are supposed to have jobs. They're supposed to be specialized in something if you're in a quote unquote modern society, or you're supposed to be a full member of the village, the organization, the tribe, whatever, if you're not in a quote unquote modern society. And I'm just using these terms very loosely here. I'll use them more precisely if you ever take a cultural anthropology class with me. Seniors, their role in society is as the bearers of tradition, the bearers of culture, the people who remember what is going on. They are the people who have lived through the crap you're living through. They've already lived through it. Now, I know society changes, the world around us changes very quickly nowadays, right? We didn't have internet when our grandparents were kids. We didn't even have internet when our parents were kids. Well, shoot, when some of you were kids, there may not have been internet. So we think about things like this, and the world changes, and we wonder, what do senior citizens have something? Do they have something to contribute? And of course they do. They have decades of practice at reasoning through problems. They have decades of practice at solving social problems. So I want you to remember that an extended ontogeny is the basis of mammalian sociality, and it is the basis of culture. Without old folks to remember the way things happened, we wouldn't have things like tradition. We wouldn't have a basis for culture. Perhaps. This last thing I want to talk about, I think this is the last thing I want to talk about with mammals, is milk. Milk, it's pretty self-explanatory. You understand it, I'm sure, what it does. Mom makes it, baby drinks it. It keeps babies alive. Actually, milk is pretty important, and at some point I'm going to expand my lectures to talk about milk some more, because milk is one of these pathways through which a mother can sort of gear her child towards living in the world that she lives in. So I already talked about how the amount of nutrition you get, and the sorts of environmental phenomena that your mother passes on to you while you are in the womb. I've talked about how that sort of makes the fetus, the unborn child, ready for the world around it. Milk is another way that children become ready. And in fact, with my monkeys, Rhesus macaques, a mother who's living in an environment that is not rich in nutrition, and that environment could be actually very rich in nutrition, but she might just be a low-ranking monkey and therefore unable to get the best nutrition. But in any case, a mother who's living in an environment that is not rich in nutrition will produce milk that kind of carries the signature of that environment with it. And when her baby drinks that milk will help gear this baby's brain development, his nervous system development, and his sensory development to prepare that child for life in a world of scarcity, or to prepare that child for life in a world where there's a lot of different resources and a lot of nutrition. So milk is one of these pathways where the genetic determinism of sociobiology gets kind of thwarted by culture and by the environment. I like showing people this picture because milk is a characteristic of all mammals. Even Mother Platypus gives milk. I like this picture. See, she's got her little pink platypus baby who's just hatched out of his egg. And she's got her little flipper on him, hugging baby. Platypuses don't have nipples. They have specialized sweat glands on their chest here that sweat out a thick oil. And that thick oil has lactose in it. Your mammary glands, not memory glands, there are no such things as memory glands, but your mammary glands, your breasts, your nipples, these are evolved from sweat glands. Mother platypus sweats out milk. Wow. So, pregnancy, live birth, extended childhood, lactation, these are great for the kids. Look at this happy little elephant, but there are drawbacks. The drawbacks are mostly for mom. Right? If you're young, are mobile, and they're hungry, then, well, mom is going to need to invest that much more time and energy and attention. Right? Look at this. Look at this. Mom's here trying to eat, trying to be on the lookout for leopards, trying to be on the lookout for poachers, and baby is just on top of her being like, la. Same thing going on here. Mom has got to pay the bills. She's got her student loans to pay back, draining all her costs, and then look at these two monsters. Not only does she have to pay to feed them, not only did she bear each of these two little monsters in her womb for 9 months, and not only did she probably provide milk to them from her own body, but now they're fighting while she's on the telephone. Kids. It's the same problem mammals all over the place suffer from. Mothers use up calories making babies, and then they use up calories and time looking for food for their babies, and then kids running around screaming and playing all the time makes it harder to avoid predators. This mother gorilla, if a leopard jumps out, she's going to have to do battle. Well, hopefully there's somebody around to help her. And so there's this great question, what keeps mothers from eating their children? This is what keeps mothers from eating their children. Mammalian offspring are adapted to manipulate their parents. It's totally true. Think about it. Oxytocin, you've heard of that. It's the cuddle hormone. You see a face like this, and you're like, "Aw, I want to take care of you." Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you're cynical and your oxytocin doesn't get released by that. But the exaggerated faces of children are attention-getting organs. And kids come complete with social intelligence on par with the most devious of monkeys. They compete with other children for the attention of adults, and they establish hierarchies amongst themselves. They are manipulative. They are devious. Just like adults, but, I'm really talking about kids here. And finally, there's this limbic system. You hear about the emotional brain that's geared towards forming effective bonds. Well, we have parts in our brains, or parts, organs. I mean, brains are not really separated into organs and discrete parts. But for our purposes, for this introductory class, let's say that there is a part of your brain that generates emotional bonds, where the record of affection is kept. These little monsters, they manipulate that affection. I mean, seriously, okay? How else do you think babies have survived all these millions of years? Because they're cute. So, this is a great panel from your coloring book. This is one of my favorites. I think you should read this if you have your coloring book. Let's go over what I want you to learn. Hormones like oxytocin, the sorts of things that create effective bonds between people. Your sensory system, babies sucking on mother's teat, looking up at mother's eyes. Uh, the milk, baby's got these adaptations to draw milk from mother's nipple. These buccinator muscles operate in programmed ways. Here's another sensory piece. And the big brain, where all this goes on, all this is sort of turned into emotion and affection. These are all ways through which children enter into a circuit with their parents. Just think of this here. What you're looking at here is a circuit between mother and child, and it goes both ways. There's interchange between them emotionally via facial expressions. There's some material interchange here. And so this mother-child bond, even though it's something that the child is exploiting for survival, this is also the point at which children start to become social. Let me put it like this. For most mammals, your mother, or whoever your caretaker was your first friend and your first social ally. So your first society was you and your mother. Your first playmate, the first person you ever played with, and the first person who ever told you what it's like to live in the world. So the parent-infant relationship is the basic component of mammalian societies. It's the basic component of your society. There really is no way to overstress the importance of uh, these first relationships. And I just want to add a few things here. Parenting and growing up are complicated. When you hear about instincts, it's suspicious. There is no maternal instinct. There is a complicated system of emotion, of metabolism, nutrition, sensory input, manipulation that goes into creating the bond between parent and child. And then that bond extrapolates, becomes bonds between friends and more family members, later becomes professional bonds, things like that. Uh, it's a complicated system, and if we say something like maternal instinct drives it, then we're reducing the complexity of it. Instinct is suspicious. Anytime anybody says instinct, you should be suspicious. Instinct, where's that? It's not something you can knock on. So instinct is suspicious, but it's weird. Mammals really, they are so geared to forming emotional bonds among one another that they are just downright promiscuous with their affections, with their desire to care. So of course we have baby monkey who loves his substitute mom, who happens to be a dog. We have this Boston Terrier. Oh no, a little French bulldog suckling a piglet. Right? She's okay with that because she has the milk and Piglet has the hunger and Piglet looks cute and small. It probably seems like a puppy to her. And then even Mother Tiger here with her 5 little pigs dressed up like tigers. I wouldn't call it instinct because it's just too complicated. But mammals are certainly promiscuous with their affection, with their love. right? Aren't you feeling a little interspecies affection here? Look at him. What's going on with him? You know what's going on with him. This is cold. You take it off. Aw, it's okay. Okay. You're a sucker for it too, and you know it. Oh, look at this. There are other kinds of animals that have mastered the techniques of human children. In fact, that could be, we could describe that as one of the primary ways through which cats and dogs survive, by being manipulative of adult humans' affections. Obviously, not all cats are going to clasp their paws together like this little uh, manipulator, but the cat is begging. My cats beg. I'm hungry. And they go just meow, trying to play on my emotions. That meowing sound that cats make, they only do that for humans. I'm serious. It's an adaptation towards life among humans. This here is also an adaptation towards life among humans, this face of his. Obviously, this is artificial selection, and so it's a direct adaptation because this was a face that humans thought was cute. Look at it, it's like a smiley face. So I'm going to try to summarize this stuff. Mammals, so far, okay, we have expanded cortexes, increased parental investment, we have a protracted ontogeny, a long childhood, which allows for a period of increased brain plasticity. We have multimodal communication, which was basically the ability of mammals to use all the different senses that they originally had evolved in a nocturnal lifestyle, that 130 million year period when mammals were these little ratty guys traveling underfoot of dinosaurs. All these things together, this is a functional complex. All these together, this is everything a mammal needs in order to be the social specialists that primates are. Right? We got the capacity to play and empathize. Empathize. We have a tendency to develop bonds with other individuals, even individuals that are not the same species as us. We have a plastic neural anatomy that can adapt to deal with different kinds of information, different kinds of environments. And we have organs specialized for communication. This is all we need in order to become social. So it's just these things that I've gone over today, these mammal characteristics that are the bases for the more complex forms of sociality that characterize apes and humans. Now, being social as a whole, we'll talk about this at length later, but being social is adaptive because if you live in a group, and sociality is just the tendency or the capacity to organize individuals into groups and to maintain those groups. If you are a social creature, this is good because you can get help raising your children, right? All that investment for your pregnancy and for bringing baby up, you don't have to do that all yourself if you've got a bunch of friends. Look, this is a pregnant meerkat. This one and this one probably already are helping her raise these two. Collective memory and problem solving. If you live in a group, you don't have to figure out everything for yourself. This goes back all the way back to what Ernst Mayr said about science as a community, right? Science is, in this very concrete way, science is making use of mammal capacities, mammalian adaptations. These little elephants don't need to remember where the water is because the matriarch has been around for 40 years and she remembers where the water is, even during times of drought. Cooperative defense. One elephant maybe is in danger from a pride of lions. A bunch of elephants together, very few enemies. These guys, they can look in all directions. Anybody sees a hawk coming, an eagle coming, a dog, or a hyena, anything like that, they can all chirp and let the whole group know, and then everybody can disappear underground. And if you live in a group, it's easier to find mates, right? Tigers, poor tigers, they don't really live in groups. They've adapted that way because group life, if you're a predator who needs to eat a lot of meat, group life just isn't that useful all the time. Because, well, you can be a solitary predator like a tiger, or you can be a group predator like a dog. Dogs have to share their meat, but that's okay because there's a lot of them and they can bring down large animals. A tiger, on the other hand, is going to do better hunting by itself. And so tigers, they have to have these big ranges and they have to travel literally sometimes hundreds of miles to find a suitable mate. But if you live in groups, you just find somebody near you. And just to define the word for you, sociality is the capacity to organize into groups. I said that at the beginning of this slide. I should have had that come up earlier. This is the last slide in this lecture. Um, I've often thought about teaching very young children, kindergartners, preschoolers, and in fact, I've been working on and off on a curriculum for preschoolers with my wife, brainstorming mostly. Um, And I've thought, well, if I had a preschooler, what would I want that person to know about mammals? And this is all a child needs to know about mammals. They have hair or fur. They give birth to live young. Mammal mothers nurse their young with milk. They have lungs and they need to breathe air. All mammals breathe air, even the ones that live in the water. Mammals that live on land have 4 legs and they have ears that stick out. That's something useful to know. It's not important for us, but most of them have ears that stick out. And mammals are warm-blooded. The bear is the same temperature, no matter whether it's wet, winter or summer. All right, well, that wraps it up for now. Uh, Lecture 10, we'll talk about primates and we'll build on this. So make sure you have all this stuff down. I'll see you.